I'm here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's.
Did the CIA write Wind of Change by the Scorpions?
As humans busied themselves about the various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied.
Dr. Loeb, what percentage chance do you give it that you have indeed uncovered extraterrestrial or non-human technology?
With infinite complacence, people went about their affairs, yet across an immense ethereal gulf, intellects vast and unsympathetic threw their plans against us.
All of a sudden, a stick out of nowhere landed right in front of us, and there was no tree, nothing overhead. Something threw it at us.
Yeah.
All things unexplained.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
Hello, all you unexplained ones. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Derringer, along with my co-hosts, Dr. Mounts and Smitty Neves. Hello,
Hey.
gentlemen.
Hey, guys.
For those
great
of you
to be back.
tuning in, please do go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, share this episode. We have grown our viewership so much over the past couple of months, and it's been really exciting to meet all of you new, wonderful, beautiful people with your open minds and your great ideas. And we encourage you to join in on this conversation as well. Send us your questions. You are in for a treat this evening. We have the beautiful Michelle Clare joining us. She is a psychic, a medium, and a near-death experiencer. She is an expert on near-death experiences, and she offers all kinds of teaching and training and classes. And tonight you get to join her and us on this wonderful journey as we dive into all things universe, about our universe. So we are going to jump in with her in just a moment, but first we've got a little commercial for you, and then we'll be back live. All Things Unexplained is free to watch on YouTube and listen to wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support our show, you can visit our YouTube store. Additionally, you can find us on Venmo under All Things Unexplained. Be sure to check out our website, allthingsunexplained.com. All proceeds from the sales of Dr. Mounts' books on Amazon and Audible also go straight to our show. Awesome. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you for joining us.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is a real treat for us. We have loved every time we've had any psychic on our show. You guys just have the most beautiful souls, and it always leaves me feeling refreshed and excited for what the next day may bring. So I know we'll get that here today. But before we fully dive in, I do want to discuss a little bit about the events yesterday. Of course, I think the entire world knows at this point that there was an assassination attempt on a former president, on Donald Trump. And sadly, the shooter and I believe an innocent bystander both lost their lives in this event. And such a traumatic and life-threatening event, not just for Donald Trump, but for everybody that was there, everybody that witnessed this, that thought for themselves that it might be their last moments on this earth too, really has an impact on the wider community. From your perspective as an expert on near-death experiences, can you share some insights into how these types of events might affect individuals and whether there are any parallels or differences compared to near-death experiences that you've studied?
Yeah, so I would love to start with just saying this. Every time that my soul has left my body in one of my 3 near-death experiences, I never experienced the physical trauma that I was going through, that my body went through. So, and I find this time after time in my readings and with other near-death experiencers. Our soul doesn't have to be connected to the shutdown of our body or the trauma that it might be going through as it is shutting down. So very often we detach, we disconnect before we absolutely transition into the light. And the other thing that's really important to know about this is that no matter how we pass, whether it's unexpected, whether it's expected, whether it's traumatic, what we transition in our sleep, We are always greeted with love and compassion and light, welcoming us into this heavenly realm, as well as our angels, our loved ones, our family, our pets. So knowing that these people woke up yesterday not expecting this, I'm sure not one of them thought this was going to be what they were headed into. What's really important for their families to know as they're working through this grief process is that their loved one is beyond okay and surrounded already in that light and love, and really working with the process with the angels of transitioning completely into that light and understanding the bigger picture. When we get out of our human form and we step into that whole soul that we really already are, we do get to see this picture on a bigger level.
That's so beautifully said. I know there's so much fear that surrounds death. And when people lose a loved one, there's a lot of trauma and grief that they try to work through as they process what has happened, or if their loved one was in pain. I know I have plenty of people in my life that fight that battle every day. And it sounds like you would be a great coach for these people that are struggling. So tell us a little bit before we dive in about where everybody can find you, what sorts of programs you offer.
Yes, they can find me at my website, michelleclaire.net, N-E-T. And with that, I do one-on-one readings. I also have classes that I offer. I have a new class coming out about soul agreements in a couple weeks. And then in the fall, I'll be launching one that will be a live class on how to connect with your life guides.
Okay. And what is a life guide? I've heard this term so much recently. So give us a breakdown of what that means.
Yeah. So what I do, I connect with angels, loved ones in spirit, life guides, or the other word people use are spirit guides, psychic information, and medical intuition. So a life guide or a spirit guide would be a being that to me appears in human form. And before our souls come into planet Earth, we are actually alive in this heavenly realm. We are planning our lifetime that we will be here. We are planning lessons that we want to learn, experiences that we want to have. My understanding from spirit world is that our lives are about 60 to 70% solid in a blueprint. And then we come in and we have the other percent that is free will. So our life guides are going to be the beings of light that will appear in human form very often to help guide us. They remember our blueprint. They remember why we chose to come to planet Earth, the lessons we want to learn, the challenges we're going to have. Truly, their goal is to try to keep us on track so that we can accomplish our mission while we're here.
That's awesome. Do you feel like everybody has a life guide, or some people are just ignoring their life guide? How is their life guide?
Yeah, that's a great question. So everyone has at least one life guide, and many people have more than one. And yes, you're allowed to ignore them. You can pretend they don't exist. You could just be unaware. I mean, all of that is very real, but they knew this was going to be part of the plan before you came in.
Okay, wonderful. So let's dive into near-death experiences. What is the definition? I mean, it sounds like what it is, I'm sure, but in common elements of near-death experiences that you've studied.
Yeah. So there's a few things that are amazing about near-death experiences. So what we are doing right now is we are kind of cataloging them with AI. And what we are finding is that it does not matter your race, your gender, your religion, how you died, where you died, your age. All of these people who are having these near-death experiences are having very similar experiences. It doesn't matter the background. They are all recording that they have been in a timeless space, that they have felt unconditional love, that they have been met with angels or loved ones in spirit. Very often they come in contact with, I would call it the master energy of the religion that they're following. So if they're Christian, they're connecting with Jesus sometimes. If they're Buddhist, they're connecting with Buddha energy, right? But so what we're finding is that the beauty of this is it actually, to me, proves that true nature of God's source or the divine, whatever word you want to use for that, because it truly transcends religion. And I am okay with religion. I'm not somebody that's against that at all. I feel like we have so many different roads and paths to source. But what we find is that as we go through this, it doesn't matter how you transitioned or what your beliefs were. I've had many atheists who have come through in readings and their families are like, but they were fearful because they didn't think there is a God, and they thought there would be nothing. And absolutely, but they were still greeted with the same light and love and compassion on the other side.
That's wonderful. With all of the division in our world right now, especially right now, unbelievable how people can take an event and just turn it into however they want to see it, right?
Right.
This idea that we all end up in the same place, greeted by the same love, should be a unifying concept, right? That we could all see each other as human brothers and sisters. And that gets lost so often. People quickly turn on each other, very quickly turn on one another. Have you had anybody come to you that you have trained and taught and talked about near-death experiences, and they've completely shifted their mindset on life and those around them?
Yes, I get to work with so many amazing clients, and I have clients around the world. This is the beauty of Zoom and everything that we're doing nowadays, right? But with that being said, yes, I get to see their life shift and change, and really get to see them re-engage with life. So what I find so often, people are in survival mode, not living and engaging. And those are very different energies. And so whether this is just kind of, we get bogged down with our daily life, I've got to go to work, the dog needs to go to the vet, the kids are hungry, on and on and on. Or actually we have the opportunity to really engage. And yesterday, I kind of want to bring this up. It's relative to the fear that I think a lot of people felt with the assassination attempt yesterday. I was doing a group reading yesterday morning in person here in the Phoenix area, and I had 20 people. And I had one woman whose mom came through, and she said, I died the way that I lived. I died from fear. I was afraid. So, and what they said was that while this lady was going through she had an illness. So it was like not literally in the moment she was passing, but leading up to that, she had this deep, deep fear of death. And so she literally came through and said to her daughter, if I could do one thing over again, I would stop living and dying in this place of fear, and I would re-engage with life, and I would actually live. And so these messages from the other side are really life-changing and profound, because they give us the freedom to lay down our fears and actually engage with life. And yesterday's situation was extremely traumatic, but what is it offering humanity? Once again, the opportunity to unite.
Yes. And I hope that we can get there. It was unbelievable to me yesterday after this assassination attempt, how quickly everybody jumped to conclusions without any information, right? Everybody just had their side that they were going to choose about whether it was real or not. And I actually took a screenshot of something that Brian Johnson wrote today. And if you don't know Brian Johnson, he's working really hard on anti-aging. In fact, his whole campaign is "Don't Die." He has been able to change his genetic code from a 40-something-year-old man to an 18-year-old man. So he's working really hard on this. But he said, Americans, we do not want war with each other. We have been algorithmically and artificially whipped up into a hate and tribal frenzy. We have been puppeteered. Our differences are small relative to the complexities of AI emergence and geopolitical tensions. Lest we forget, we are fighting for our evolutionary survival in a violent and uncaring universe. Others in the past met the demands of their moment. Now it's our turn. Let us be clear-headed and brave. And I thought, okay, this is important, right? We're not supposed to be fighting each other. We have to stop.
Well, we really do. Here's the challenge. On a soul level, we all came here to planet Earth for the contrast, because when we are in this heavenly realm and everything is perfect, we can't imagine what it feels like to not be feeling as one, to not have everything rainbows, butterflies, unicorns, all of these things. Yeah. So our souls do choose to come to planet Earth for the contrast. However, we are in a period of time now where we need to be able to do that in a much more gentle way and still be able to learn from contrast.
Yes, beautifully put. Well, I know Smitty wanted to dive into a little bit about your personal experiences.
Yeah, you mentioned that you had 3. Can you share, at least, if you don't mind, one of your near-death experiences with us? That way,
absolutely.
It'd be great for our listeners to hear, and us too.
Yes. So I'd like to actually touch on all three because I think there are some interesting things. All three of them are very different. So you would think if I was going back to that heavenly realm, it would be almost Groundhog's Day, and each time I showed up, it would be the same experience. But it wasn't. It was different every time. And I think that this is really important. People need to hear, because what they know is that this heavenly realm is all about love and compassion, and it's going to greet you in the way that you're comfortable. And so if you are expecting mountains and oceans, you will see mountains and oceans. And if you are expecting, extraterrestrials, you will find extraterrestrials, So my first near-death experience actually happened in April of 2000. And at that point in time, I was in a hospital in Tucson, Arizona, visiting my sister-in-law who had just had a baby. And I was talking to her RN in the hallway because her RN was actually my friend from high school. And as we were out there talking and catching up, I had this massive seizure, and I had no awareness that I was having a seizure. I just remember talking to her. And the next thing I know, I'm opening my eyes and I am laying in this beautiful white room. And in this white room, the walls are alive. They're solid, and yet I can see that they're breathing, and every molecule in them is radiating this light and love. And I look up and I notice that I'm laying with my head in my grandma's lap. And my grandma had transitioned a couple years before this. And she looked down at me and she was smiling, and she was the brightest, healthiest version of her, youngest version of her that I could remember. And I remember really noticing that there appeared to be no time. There was nothing there in that sense. And I remember feeling this overwhelming sense of bliss and unconditional love. And as I was looking up at my grandma, I looked up next to her, and what I noticed next to her was that there was this magnificent angel, and this angel was about 12 feet tall, so much bigger than I was expecting. I had been raised Catholic, so I believed in angels and saints and Jesus and all of this, but I didn't expect this angel to be that big. And so when I looked at her, I remember being almost drawn into her energy. And as I was being drawn in, I thought, I want to see her wings, because I wanted to see those huge feather wings, like on these statues behind me. And as I went to look at her wings, what I found is that they were actually made of light, and they were iridescent, and they seemed to move almost like the aurora borealis. And at the same time, they spanned eternity. Like I literally could not see the place where these wings trailed off. And as I just sat there, I was in awe of her energy, beauty, grace, just profound love that I could feel from her. And I thought to myself, what is your name? And she answered me. She said, my name's Madeline, and I'm one of your guardian angels. At that point in time, I was a little bit surprised because I didn't know anything about telepathic communication. And I knew she had just kind of heard what I was thinking. The next thing I know, I'm just laying in this beautiful space and no hurry to leave. And I hear someone yelling, code, code, code. So because I was already in the hospital and I had quit breathing during this seizure, they were calling the code team. And at that point in time, I feel myself get almost shoved back into my body. And it feels like I kind of dropped out of a 2-story building. I can feel like a descent. I can feel this denseness and this heaviness around me. It felt like my arm alone weighed 500 pounds. The density shift was crazy. It went from being light as a feather to a ton of cement is what it felt like in just a second. And I started coming through at that point in time. They admitted me into the hospital. I had never had a seizure prior to that or since then.
Yep.
And they
Really?
Yes. And they weren't able to really tell me. They did the head scan, the heart scans, all of that. They couldn't pinpoint what had happened.
Wild.
Well, do you believe, had you had psychic abilities prior to your first near-death experience? And if you did this heighten your abilities?
Yes, absolutely. So I did have a knowing as a kid, a knowing of source, a knowing of angels, When my grandfather transitioned when I was 12, I knew that he and I were still in communication. I would tell my mom what he was saying, and she would say, well, that's what you would think he would say if he was still here. So I kind of learned that this was mine and I was going to keep it to myself, but I wasn't getting messages for other people at that point in time. And yes, this near-death experience definitely enhanced my ability to feel angels around, loved ones in spirit around. I will tell you this, I did not know this was a near-death experience. That was not a term that I had heard in the year 2000. I knew I had had an experience that was more real than my daily life, and it was more vivid. But I didn't have that term for it. So I did notice that I had an increase in my connection with spirit world. And now what I know from the research we've done is that about 70% of people who have near-death experiences come back with psychic and mediumship abilities.
Well, have you ever interviewed anyone that had the opposite experience, like, say, the hail experience?
You know,
that's a good question.
I have met multiple people through different conferences and different clients who have come to me that have had these negative or traumatizing experiences. And this is really what I have been informed by, and what we've found as we've gone through them. So I've had different people come to me and say, well, I've heard about your experience, but here's what I had. However, when we move into the trauma that they had found, what we find at the end of each one of these near-death experiences are these people that have had these challenging ones will always say, and then the light came in and I had the option. I could leave and be a better person. Or some of them will say the hand of God reached down into the darkness and pulled me into the light, and I felt this profound love. And so there are people that have had some challenging experiences, but they are always surrounded by the light during this time, and they're always given the option to move into that brighter energy.
Right. Well, what about, how's this impacted your view on your life, maybe the world in general, these experiences that you've had?
Yeah. So, honestly, this first experience impacted me personally, and the fact that I knew that now angels were real. My grandmother knew I was coming, right? Heaven knows we're coming. It has a psychic ability. I didn't know I was going there that day, but my grandma and the angel were waiting for me. So it really validated some stuff that I had known, but it's not until my second near-death experience where I go even deeper. And so after this first near-death experience, I kind of come back to my normal life. Like, I have a strong knowing inside of more information, but nothing has changed. So I go back. At that point in time, I was newly married, working for the airlines, and I just kind of keep this information with me, and it's private. My next near-death experience happens in May of 2006. And at that point in time, I have 3 little kids. I have a daughter who's 5, one that's 2.5, and my son was 6 weeks old. And so after I had my son, I had had quite a few complications with him, and I was in the hospital the majority of 6 weeks following having him. So at that point, they decided they needed to do a D&C, which is a procedure where they clear out the uterus surgically. It's a 45-minute outpatient procedure, and then they send you home. And the night before, I had this pit in my stomach, and I just knew I should not go through with this procedure. But I was so tired of being sick and in the hospital. I wanted to be at home with my kids, with my infant. And so the next day I went in for the procedure. The doctors assured me it was going to be easy, it was going to be quick, and I would be on my way home. So I've had anesthesia before, and whenever I've had anesthesia, it's just a blank. There's not a dream, there's not a memory, it's just kind of nothing for me. This time I remember counting backwards for the anesthesiologist, and the next thing I know, my beautiful white German Shepherd, who was about 102 pounds and had passed away a couple of years prior to this, walks into the operating room, lays her head on my gurney, looking at me, and we're gone. And we are on this phenomenal beach. And on this beach, there are colors that we don't have here. There are smells. There are just visuals and emotions almost that we don't even have on planet Earth. Every drop of water in the ocean is radiating light and love. Every molecule, every cell, and every plant, everything is just almost singing with light and love that is all encompassing. And as I'm on this beach with my beautiful dog, she looks like she's about 2 years old. She is happy. She is healthy. She's energetic. We are telepathically communicating again. She's letting me know how happy she is that I'm there. And we are just running on this beach. And as we're running on this beach, I start to notice, gosh, we're not getting hot, not getting tired, not getting thirsty. And here's the funny thing about running. Human Michelle, I hate to run. I will tell my friends, if you see me running, call 911. Like, that's enough.
Same.
Yeah, that is really what I'm. And here I am in this near-death experience, running and running on this amazing beach with my dog. While we're running on the beach, I become aware of my son, who was 6 weeks old at that point in time, and he was at the house with my mom. And so I feel him because he is scared and he knows that I'm leaving. So we're talking about soul connections here, which we all have with other souls that are in human bodies at this point in time. And so I remember going to him and I remember saying, I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to find a way to stay. And I didn't know what to do. So I started praying. So I started saying, it's not my time. My kids still need me. I'm not ready. And the next thing I know, I am transported back into the operating room. I see Jesus come in, and Jesus comes in as my best friend ever, not as wanting me to worship or pray or confess my sins. It was like, I am here to help you. And in that moment, this operating room lights up with this beautiful white golden light. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in post-op. And in that, I find out that my 45-minute procedure had turned into a 3.5-hour emergency surgery because they had ruptured my uterus in multiple places and they had missed my artery by 1 millimeter.
Wow.
Ooh, that's heavy. My kids are like the same age breakdown as yours. So that story hit hard.
Yeah. And it was really hard because what happened was also when they ruptured the uterus in multiple places, they pushed the infection into my body. So now I'm running fevers and I'm on IV antibiotics again. And I was in the hospital even longer. With that being said, it took me about 4 months just to get back to 80% of my ability to function because of everything that my body had gone through. There were some big lessons that I learned in this. First of all, number one, I learned follow those gut feelings. When you are sitting there the night before thinking I shouldn't do this, you probably shouldn't do this. The other thing that I really learned is that our souls are capable of ushering in miracles. And I truly believe that in that moment with me asking to stay, praying to stay, my soul was ushering in this miracle where things were allowed to happen and I was able to stay that might not have happened otherwise. And the other thing that I learned with this near-death experience is that our transition into heaven realm occurs on at least 3 levels. It might even be more than that, but to my awareness right now, there are at least 3 involved. And the first one would be, can the human form sustain existence, right? Can it sustain life? If you've had a massive car accident, that might not be possible. The second level is on our human soul plan. So if I had transitioned that day, would one of my friends stepped up to help with my kids, one of my sisters, would my husband have remarried so that my children's lives would have continued on in the most productive way possible? And then the third level is really between our soul and source. So I do believe there are times when we are told, hey, it's time to come home. Come on, welcome home. You're done. And I believe there are other times where we do have opportunities to choose to stay or go.
Very well put. I'm going to turn it over to Tim to ask. He wants to ask some questions about psychic abilities.
Sure.
Well, we still have one more near-death experience to hear, though.
Oh, that's right.
Let's dive into that first.
And we should hear, but I do want to comment real quick that in addition to what CJ said that she had in common with your second near-death experience, CJ also has a giant white dog.
I do. I know. Yes, there's lots of commonalities going here. I can feel that. I could feel that big time.
Yeah, it is one of those things. And will tell you, my soul agreement with my kids for them to anchor me here to planet Earth, they have absolutely completed that assignment. So my third near-death experience, that happens on November 1st, 2011. So for people who like ones, that's 11-111. There's lots of ones in that number. And in the house that I live in, I have 14-foot ceilings. About 12 feet off the ground, I have battery-operated candles, and every night they would turn on and glow and turn off. And so my younger two kids were home at that point in time. They were 5, 8, and my oldest was 10. My oldest was in an after-school program. And I said to my younger two kids, I said, as soon as I get done replacing this battery, we're going to go get your sister. So I remember climbing up the ladder, getting towards the top, and feeling it start to shift. And I literally remember thinking, this is going to hurt. And in the moment that I thought this is going to hurt, I was completely ripped out of my body. I was turned around. I was facing my body in the ladder, suspended in the air, kind of like a freeze frame in a movie. And I was standing with these 3 people that I didn't know. And yet they felt like dear family or friends. There was an Asian man, an Egyptian woman, and a Hawaiian man. And as I was standing with them, I was once again in this timeless space. I felt that unconditional love of heaven coming in around me. And they said to me, they said, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay or do you want to go? And I was trying to comprehend how I literally had forever to decide what I wanted to do when I was watching my body and I knew it was going to hit the floor in less than a second. And so I kind of got a little stuck on that, like, wow, how is this even working that I have forever to decide? No one's rushing me. And as I'm watching my body, I see this other angel come in. And this angel comes in dressed in red and gold. The moment that I see this angel, I know that this angel is here to either shift something so that I can stay longer or to take me straight home to that heavenly realm. Like, there was no doubt in my mind. And as I'm looking at my body and the angel and the ladder, I look down in the kitchen and I see my younger two kids. And the minute that I see them, I know I have to stay. And so I make this, it's really a telepathic kind of thing, like, oh, I can't go yet. I'm not done. I need to stay. And as I make this commitment to coming back, I am immediately downloaded with a bunch of information. And the information is like, okay, but now you've got to go back and you've got to do your mediumship and you've got to help people in the way that you can help them. And you need to know that your marriage will probably end in divorce and that there will be more trauma down the road. And this is what I'm downloaded with, amongst many other things. But I still have memories come back to this day. So I don't even think I remember everything that they gave me in that moment because things are still revealed to me. And I remember standing in that heavenly realm, knowing that I was agreeing to come back to whatever physical trauma I had, to most likely my 25-year marriage ending in divorce, to more trauma coming, and that I was agreeing to take on this mission of following my mediumship. And I absolutely did. And so what happens is I fall off of the ladder. The back of my head hits the corner of my granite island in the kitchen. So I have a 5.5-inch skull fracture, a brain bleed. I lost my taste, my smell, part of my hearing, my equilibrium. But I literally survived the fall by 1/2 inch because that was how much my head missed my brainstem. I mean, the counter missed my brainstem by. So the base of my skull was fractured all the way through, but missed my brainstem by 1/2 inch. And that was literally, I knew what the angel had moved my head 1/2 inch so that I could stay. So as I come back, obviously, I want to reiterate again, I felt none of this physical trauma. Remember, in each one of these, my soul has left my body before I'm in that heavenly realm, before I'm having some type of physical trauma. But at that point in time, you know, I come back in and it is not a good situation. And so my son at that point had tried to call 911. He was 5 and we believed his call didn't go through. My daughter, who was 8, called, was able to get me help. I was, you know, taken to the hospital. They did the CAT scan, sent on to the specialty hospital for the brain bleed in ICU. And I was there in the hospital for about 10 days. So what happens following this is that I get to come home. I can barely walk down the hall. My vertigo is horrible. I've done many therapies, vestibular therapy, physical therapy, over the years. There's been a lot that's gone into the healing process. But I start to recover slowly, and I have an awareness that I've made this agreement. But honestly, I'm just going to say it. My brain was scrambled from the trauma that I had, from the brain bleed, from the skull fracture. There was no part of me that could start figuring out, how am I going to put this pieces together? How is this going to work? So this is November. December comes, we get through Christmas. By January, my son, Josh, who was 5 years old at the time, started getting really depressed because he said, Mom, I tried to call 911 and my call didn't go through. And we would say, but Josh, you opened the door for the policeman, you let help in. And he would say, I didn't need to be there. Sophie could have done it without me. And he would tell this to myself, my mom, my mother-in-law. And there was nothing we could say that would lift his spirits around this. So the end of January of 2012, I'm in my kitchen. My grandfather, who transitioned, who passed away when I was 12, comes through to me in my first huge visit after this head injury. And he's standing here talking to me. And I said to him, it's been so long since I've seen you. And he said, I knew it would seem like that to you. Which was really interesting, because that tells you he wasn't that far away from me, whether or not I was seeing him, right? He talked about my accident. He talked about my son, who they've never met in this lifetime, and about how good he is with electronics. And then he said to me, you need to get the 911 recording. There's something on there you should know. Well, I didn't even know I could get the 911 recording. So I go down to the police department. I order it. It comes in a couple weeks later. I put it in. I start playing it, and I hear them say, 911, what's your emergency? And in his little broken voice, my son Josh says, Sophie, what do I say? And he lays the phone down. And so for the next minute and a half, you can hear 911 trying to get their attention. You can hear him saying, I'm going to go push the panic alarm on the house. And she says, hold on, let me try calling 911. She picks up the phone, hangs it up, calls 911, and her call goes through too. And they dispatch her to talk to the firemen who were en route. And so when Josh came home from kindergarten that day, I literally said to him, your call went through. Help was coming. And it was like I had lifted this 10,000-pound weight off this 5-year-old little boy, because he felt his worth. He knew he had done something to help me. And you could just see it flood back into him. And at this point in time, I am clearly realizing the gravity of mediumship, of messages from loved ones on the other side. And it could not have happened to anyone that was more dear to my heart than one of my children. And so at that point, I start to realize this is real, this is big, and I've agreed to this. Where am I going now, right? And so I went and I actually started counseling because I wanted to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. And of course, Spirit led me to the perfect counselor who said, Michelle, what a gift. Let's get you a mentor. And that was when I started my training and really following through with that part. And Spirit, life guides in that third near-death experience, they were accurate. My marriage did end in divorce after 25 years. He had a very hard time with me following my mediumship, amongst other issues that were happening. And there was more trauma. Last August, my life partner transitioned by suicide. So even though I've had these amazing experiences with that heavenly realm, even though I feel like I work in service to the higher power, it doesn't take away the trauma that we are going to experience or the experience of this life.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
We're glad it missed by an inch, because we're glad you're here with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Tim, we'll send it to you now.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Michelle. We're talking with Michelle Clare tonight, and we're so glad that she's here with us to talk more about near-death experiences and psychic abilities and so forth. And Michelle, one thing I've been wondering is I hear a lot of people talk about terms like empath, telepath, psychic, medium. You've said some tonight. Can you clarify some of these terms for us?
Yes, absolutely. So let's start with telepath. Telepathic communication is communication that isn't vocabulary. It's not words. It's not English. So it could be energy. It could be full sentences and messages in your head. We are living antennas. So, here's an example of some kind of energetic communication, which verges in part on telepathic. When you get in the elevator and there's someone creepy there and you step over 2 feet, or you're in line at the bank and you're like, oh, I just need to inch up a few more inches to get away from this person, right? That's an energetic communication. So telepathic for me, and I do this when I'm in readings and when I'm working with people's spirit teams, it's an energy transmission that transcends words. So when I'm communicating with loved ones in spirit or angels, it's actually coming through in feelings, which is more clear and more vivid to me than them just standing here speaking sentences to me. So that's telepathic. Empathic. So we have many empaths on this planet. And empathic is when we're actually feeling what other people are feeling. And we probably know this because we always have these friends or family members who, if they hear that someone is having a bad day or a hard time, it literally drops their energy. We see them go, oh, and they're feeling it and they're carrying it for them. So that's kind of empathic. And it's not actually productive to carry other people's emotions and energy. We really want to stay in a clear, clean vessel with our own emotions and energy. The way when I'm talking to my empaths, I say, think about it as going to the airport and you start carrying everybody else's suitcase for them. But guess what? The suitcase clones. So they still have to get through their own baggage. And now you're carrying it too, right? So when we're empathic, it's very much challenging for the empath because they're feeling everyone's everything. But it doesn't have to be that way. So one of the things that my agreement with my angels and my guides is that I'm okay to be aware and to know, but I don't need to feel it. So I can know that my person is in grief or fear or whatever my client is at the time, but I don't personally need to feel it. Can you repeat the other 2 words? We got empath, telepathic.
Empath, telepath, psychic, and medium.
Yes. Okay. So I love all of these questions. So psychic information. That is what each of us are carrying in our energy field. So there is a little bit of a difference between a psychic and a medium, and some are both. So psychics are reading what's in your energy field. So I would be like reading, okay, this looks like this is most likely to happen. Probably in 6 months, we're going to have a new job opportunity, or there's a new relationship coming in. But that is the person reading your energy. When I am doing mediumship, I'm not reading your energy. I'm connecting to your loved one in spirit. So that's a different connection. It's a soul-to-soul connection between me and the person in spirit world, and I'm connecting with them and getting the information from them.
Well, thank you for addressing those. One thing I wondered, Michelle, is after your first near-death experience, and I think this is a weird question. It's an odd question, but I wonder, do you think it made you more prone to future near-death experiences?
I actually think it was a wake-up call, and I chose to ignore it, so I got a few more opportunities to wake up. I don't think that it made me more prone to them. What I know about our soul agreements and our soul plans, we have what we call exit points. And our soul, before it comes into this earth realm, usually puts in between 3 to 5 exit points in everyone's lifetime. So that could be the near miss car accident. It could be the time your appendix ruptured. It could be, right? We have these options and opportunities where our soul says, okay, earth is challenging. And just in case, where's this door that I can leave from if I need to? And so for me, what I know is that I've had at least 3 exit points that were possible opportunities for me to go. But for each time I've chosen to stay when I was given that opportunity. I don't think it made me more prone. I will say this, because people like to hear this. Very often when we're talking about near-death experiences, people talk about the tunnel of light, and they saw this bright white light in this tunnel. And that is beautiful. And in none of mine did I have that experience. I literally blinked and I went from here to there, so but I think that's because my soul wasn't expecting that. My soul that I knew that I could just blink and be home. And so I didn't need the tunnel to guide me home. But if we need that, it will show up.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. And, I want to ask you about something, and it's going to tie into at least one of our listener questions. So I don't want to spoil the listener questions, but what you've described, it all seems like very positive experiences. And from what I've read, most near-death experiences are very positive, if not exhilarating, or maybe you could say that they even give you a high, sort of, the near-death experience. Have you ever been tempted, or have you ever, sort of like, I'm addicted to caffeine, so I gotta have coffee, whether it's good, bad, or in between, just because I need the caffeine. Do you ever find yourself craving? This is also going to sound odd, but craving whatever sort of high you got off of the near death experience?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. So, I mean, I'm sure if you've read many near-death experiences too, we have people that come back from them that are bitter, sad, depressed, can't believe they're here, feel rejected by heaven. There's a lot of emotions that people will feel when they come back. So yes, do I crave that feeling of absolute perfection? And when I say that, what I mean by that is that in these realms, there is nothing about me that is unlovable. Even though everyone sees you inside and out, knows your worst behavior, your best behavior, everything about you is loved and perfect and whole. Do I crave that? Absolutely, I crave that. I mean, one of the things for me, though, that is a blessing is that every day when I get to do my passion, which is my readings for people, I get to connect with spirit world and that energy again. So for me, it is always available in the way that I do that. The other thing that I would say is, I believe it's available for all of us in other ways, which would be a really deep meditation. A lot of times we find ourselves searching instead of receiving. So even in meditation, we might be searching for the answer, searching for our loved one in spirit, instead of opening up our energy to receive that unconditional heavenly love that's available for all of us.
Right. And you brought up in your first near death experience this encounter with an angel, and I believe it was a giant angel or a very large angel. And you clearly have had experiences or interactions with other beings that you might call angels. And a lot of talk in the UFO community nowadays is a connection between angels and demons and UFO phenomenon, or aliens, and perhaps aliens, angels, demons. They're all the same thing, maybe. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do have thoughts on that. I think when you're talking like that, let's talk about radio stations and frequencies, right? So when we're talking about the angel, I like to tell people when I'm starting a reading, this is all frequencies, right? Vibration and frequency. If I'm going to talk to your angels, we're going to channel 111. Talking to your life guides, channel 112. Grandma, channel 103, right? We're
Like that.
directing our frequency. So think about the perfect vibrational match, right? If we know we're tuning into channel 107 and that's the country music station, it's not going to have rock music. It's going to be the perfect vibrational match. So this is what I feel about ETs. I absolutely believe they exist, probably beyond the numbers that we can even imagine. But with that being said, there is going to be with them, they are somewhat like humans. They are going to probably have some form, some body, some shape, some suit that is anchoring their soul in. They are also going to have ones that are like humans. Some are very kind and loving. Some are not so kind and loving, right? We have this huge variation within ETs. Just look at the difference in vibration planet Earth can hold. We can hold the vibration of Hitler all the way to the vibration of Jesus Christ and above and below that, right? So that's just one planet. So yes, I do believe ETs exist. Do I think some of them are probably more kind and benevolent than others? Absolutely. Would I compare them to angels? No, because I still feel when I tune into the angel frequency, that's channel 111, and there's not country music, rap, rock, anything else playing. It's a different vibrational frequency that transcends that physical body. Now, could an ET be an angel in the angelic realm when they left their body? Very possible. They probably could, but there's a difference still with connected to a body versus angelic realm. And let's talk about demons, because this is kind of something that I don't even really like that word. Are there darker souls? Are there heavier energies? Absolutely. We see that playing out right here on planet Earth in the human realm, right? But here's the thing about that. The light is always stronger. The light will always win. There might be energy that's not vibrating at the highest level, but the light is still holding the space for that energy to choose to vibrate at a higher level, if that makes sense. So none of us are ever stuck in that.
That's great. I don't think I've ever heard it explained that way. And that makes a lot of sense. As much as anything else I've ever heard, that makes a lot of sense. So now I'm wondering, when I turn to outlaw country or classic country frequency, like can I tune in to Hank Williams, but Hank Williams Sr., that is, who passed away quite a long time ago. But that brings me to something else I was wondering about, Michelle. So I used to love this series by Dean Koontz, the author, and it was called Odd Thomas. Have you ever heard the Odd Thomas books? Well, Odd Thomas had these gifts similar to yours, right? But one very unique and interesting things that happened to Odd is he had a couple of spirits that we've all heard of that would follow him around, and one of them was Elvis. Elvis would just follow him around all the time, right?
Frank Sinatra.
And Frank Sinatra, right? Smitty, you read Odd Thomas too, right?
That's one of my favorite book series.
When Elvis, I believe, transitioned, Frank Sinatra ended up following him Odd around for some reason. So I did wonder, Michelle, do you ever encounter other spirits that you did not know in life? You mentioned your grandfather, I believe, but do you ever encounter others that, besides not just when you're doing like for somebody else, but just on your own time?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we all have, so there's the opportunity to connect to ETs. There's the opportunity to connect to multiple timelines of the same version of me, of spirits in those timelines. So yes, because I want you to think of this again as radio stations or frequencies. So if I want to connect to another planet, another dimension, another spirit, Cleopatra, whatever this is. Yeah, absolutely, because it's all available. It's all playing right now, kind of in the same way. Think of it as satellite music, right? We have a million stations that are on and playing at one moment in time, but which one do you want to tune into? But they are all playing now.
Okay, great. Thank you. And how long, let's say spirits that you're familiar with or not familiar with, how long do they tend to hang around for you? Or what's the longest one has ever just been there where you could see or experience it?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. I always feel my angels and my life guides with me. I mean, I chose them to guide me on this life journey. And so I can always feel their presence. But usually when I'm doing readings for my clients, my rules, and I do have rules with Spirit World, is they leave when their person leaves or they leave when the Zoom ends. So I don't have like that energy. If I am feeling a spirit or a soul connecting to me for my own good or my own evolution, really they'll stay as long as they need to. But a lot of times they will come in just to let me know. And I want to say it like this: let me know that station's available. Hey, Michelle, you haven't tried classic rock on channel 108, just so you know, we're here, and so maybe I'm hearing that station for a few days, but now I know that I can put it in my mind that, oh yeah, this is available to me too.
So when we have situations like your grandfather, I suspect that he may come to you, because of who you are. Okay.
Correct.
But otherwise, do you think that some of these spirits are just here for some other reason and that you can see them or that you draw them out?
Yes, I do. So I know a lot of mediums and psychic knows there are spirits on planet Earth that have never incarnated into human form. They are just kind of testing the waters right now. They just want to see, like, do I even want to get a body and stay here for 100 years? So there are spirits, energy that are here, even just seeing if that's where they want to go. The other thing with that is that when you are more open, and I do want to say this, this. We all have this gift, okay? Everyone has this ability to connect to their loved ones. It's a little bit like math. You know, we can all do basic math. We're not all going to be physicists, but we can all do it to a certain level, right? And so when we have our loved ones that are coming in, sometimes they'll say, oh my gosh, I had this dream of my mom last night. Yes, you did. That's how your mom's connecting with you, or this ability. And so yes, there are spirits though that when they see that, I kind of think of it, we got to go back to like the 80s. You remember when you'd be driving through town Saturday night and the car dealership would have that big spotlight on, like going around the sky. That's how spirits see people who are mediums or psychics that can see them. And they are drawn to that energy because they're like, oh, you see me, you hear me, you feel me, you know I exist.
You talked about the 80s, and I instantly got this thought of riding around the courthouse square in the 80s, and the Joy Theater was the main attraction, you know, on the courthouse square, and it might be Raiders of the Lost Ark on or something. And none of us had cell phones, but we had boom boxes, you know, and cassette tapes going and all that good thing. So, you know, the Catholic Church has this thing about purgatory, right? And maybe souls can be stuck in between from leaving their bodies to whatever their ultimate destination is. Have you ever had a spirit ask you for help? Not a person ask you to contact a spirit, but a spirit contact you for help?
You know, yes, I have. So let's talk about purgatory for a moment, though, okay? Because I do believe that souls usually go straight into the light. Sometimes they get caught in between, which we would call that ghost energy or whatever we want to deem that as humans, right? But normally, listen, when you have grandma, grandpa, your dog, whoever is in the light and saying, hey, come over here, it's really great, you're going to like it here, you're probably going to go. So most souls transition into the light pretty effortlessly. I would say this about purgatory. It is never a place, that purgatory energy. I actually told my mom 6 months before she transitioned from breast cancer, I said, Mom, I have great news for you. There is no purgatory. I've never had a soul come through to me and be like, contact my family, I just got out of purgatory. My mom glared at me. She was so mad because she was so diehard Catholic all the way through that she just could not handle that I said that. And I didn't mean it. I thought I was sharing good news with her, and she was just not having it. But yes, I have had an encounter. I was doing a study at ION, so the Institute of Noetic Sciences in the San Francisco area. My daughter, who was 17 at the time, and I went to the hotel, dropped off our bags. The minute I walked in, I was like, oh, this place is haunted. Like, I just felt it, the way you would expect to feel it. We dropped off the bags, went and did this study. I didn't say anything to my daughter. I didn't want to freak her out. We were at dinner and talking about going back to the hotel. And she said, well, you know, that place is haunted, right? And I was like, how do you know? She's like, you can just feel it. So we go back to the hotel that night. And she goes to bed. I had been fighting with the thermostat all night, kept dropping to 64. I was trying to get it up to 74, but the temperature kept dropping. I go to get in the shower, and I'm in the shower, and in the exact same second, the light turned off in the bathroom and the water went ice cold, and I saw this elderly woman. And I start screaming. So I start screaming for my daughter. I can't see. I'm cold. It's dark. I'm in a hotel. I grab my towel. My daughter comes in and she's like, what happened? And I said, I tell her what happened. And she said, okay, I'm going back to sleep. And I'm like, what do you mean you're going to sleep? She said, well, you'll handle it. And I'm like, oh gosh. So now I got to figure out how to handle this, right? So I go sit down on my bed and I start connecting with this elderly woman that I saw. And she starts giving me information. She says she's been in this hotel for about 50 to 60 years in our human time. I don't know what that's like in her time. And she said she was really scared to transition into the light because she thought she was going to be judged. And so I just start calling in the angels. I start calling in the light. I start sending her love. I can literally see her in front of me. I see these two huge angels come in, and she's like hunched over and on a cane, and I can see her in her elderly form. It's like this beautiful spotlight of golden light opens up in front of her. The minute she steps into it, she stands up. I see her from behind. Her hair is long. She's healthy. She's standing straight. and she's gone. So the thing with this is the light was always available to her. She was just afraid to step into it because she thought she was going to be judged. But with my ability to just sit there and coax her and send her love and call in her angels, she finally felt safe enough to go, which is where she needed to be all along.
That's great. One thing I've noticed
Wild.
is you use this term transition.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind me asking what's the genesis of that term for you?
Yeah, because I'm really aware of the fact that we don't die. And when I was on the other side in my near-death experiences, what I was experiencing there was more vivid than my most vivid day in human form. And then as I get to progress with my work and connect to all these loved ones and spirits and angels and life guides, death is really an illusion. Do we leave our human form? We do. We go from like an ice cube to mist, right? We change forms in that sense, but we never really die. Death is a human idea that's not real. And so I use the word transition because really it's a transition from one form to the other, but we never cease to exist. So even if the sun exploded and planet Earth was swallowed up today and all of us, we would cease to exist on planet Earth in human form, but we would not cease to exist throughout eternity.
I love that. I really love that. I think I'm going to start using that term myself.
Yeah, me too.
For sure. And before we get to a couple of hot takes and listener questions, I wanted to see if CJ or Smitty had any follow-up.
Oh my gosh, I have so much. It's unreal. But I want to be respectful of your time. So
including your own haunted experiences, which you've had with haunted properties.
So many of the things that you've said tonight, so many of the stories that you've said, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many connections. But for those of you that haven't yet, go to michelleclaire.net, because if you have not gotten something from this conversation, then there's no hope for you. No, I'm kidding, teasing. But go to michelleclaire.net, sign up for her classes. I know everybody wants to know more at this point. I do have one just kind of fun question. What's the number one thing that people ask you when they're coming to you for psychic help or your medium ability? What's the number one go-to question?
Yeah. So there are two main reasons people will come for psychic, and that's career or love. Those are like by far the top two questions that people have in the psychic world. When we're talking mediumship, a lot of times people are coming in fear, like, is my loved one okay? Do they know that I'm missing them? Right. So that's really the other place that they come from. I mean, here's a funny little side note. It is interesting to find out how many people that I have known for years will finally like have a couple of drinks on New Year's Eve and come up and be like, Michelle, like I was so scared to get to know you and hang out with you. And I'm like, why? Okay, look, I'm 5 feet tall, 95 pounds. It's not like I'm big and intimidating, right? And they're like, well, I thought you were like reading my soul and you saw every bad thing I'd ever done. And I was like, oh my gosh. So let's talk about that for a moment. Psychics and mediums do not walk around on all the time reading everybody. It's completely unproductive. So I'm not sitting here reading any of you right now. What I do is when I'm going to get into my reading, I open up and I start tapping into the information that's coming in. But it's really funny because it wouldn't be productive for my human experience. Like, how would I even get through the grocery store? Every other person in there has angels, life guides, and loved ones in spirit. Like, I wouldn't even make it through the produce section. Right. So, that's just kind of a funny tidbit that people.
I could see that, though. I could see people being a little hesitant. I think people are hesitant to be friends with me because I host a podcast about UFOs.
I was going to say, CJ goes through the same thing. And I think, you talked about the 80s. I think people probably associate you with the psychic from Poltergeist.
Oh.
She was not very super, charming or anything.
Oh, man. Well, we've got lots of people tuning in right now. So for those of you that are on here, if you have questions, now's your time to get them in. Put them in all caps. We're going to do some hot takes, and then we're going to get into some listener questions. Smitty, any follow-ups from you before we...
No, I'm just looking forward to see what our listeners have to say.
Yes, this has been wonderful.
Absolutely. And we do have a hot take here for you, Michelle, if you're up for just a couple of them. And yeah, I kind of teased this a little bit earlier, Michelle. and I see a lot of this on X or Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Can near-death experiences be induced or simulated? So this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that, there's talk or studies that say that, there's a high that comes from near-death experiences that and people will seek this sort of thing out. So what is your opinion on this?
Right. So I would say this, we know that people are looking for this, right? People are doing, oh my gosh, I don't know what, ayahuasca, they're doing the God particle, MDMA, whatever drugs they're doing, trying to simulate this. It might have a similar feeling, but it's not, because what you're doing in a near-death experience is not drug induced. And the ability to feel it so clearly and carry it with you is going to be different. So there might be some things that are similar, but it's not going to be the same thing. The part that says, can NDEs be induced? Every single one of them is by some sort of trauma, right? But the simulated part, you might be able to feel part of it, but I don't think, if every NDE person thought that they could feel that again, they would. But those of us who have experienced it know there's only one way to get there.
Right.
Y'all remember that movie with Kiefer Sutherland where they actually would stop their heart? Do you remember that?
Right.
I can't remember the name of that movie, but they were trying to test out near-death experience.
In there. Yes, I remember it. So yes, NDEs are induced, technically. Simulated, it would be the difference of driving the simulator in high school versus driving a car. Yeah. Those are very different. You get a kind of general idea, but they're different.
So what's interesting to me is that I think the theory is that these drugs release a similar chemical in the brain that near-death experiences do. But who's studying a brain during a near-death experience in terms of their chemical output?
Exactly. Nobody, but trying to save your life.
Yeah, like who's doing? Nobody's stopping the saving of the life to study the chemical. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is this is going to be one of those topics that you could Google and find information either way. So it's going to depend what you're looking for. My personal opinion would be, I don't think so. I think you could find something that might be similar, but it would not have the magnitude of an NDE.
Well, and another thing that's happening a lot these days, and you see this a lot on X, is that some people think that, psychedelics and mushrooms and different things can literally open up portals to other dimensions or put them in contact with otherworldly phenomenon, such as UFOs or aliens or angels or demons. We have people seeking these things out through these means. So, do you think that there is some sort of parallel connection here going on, maybe through drugs or other things, which we are not advocating, by the way?
Right. So what I think is that those portals and those energy streams are already here and available to us, but sometimes people do psychedelics, which drop their logical way of thinking and they see them. But I believe those are already here and available. The mushroom doesn't open a portal. The portal's here. It's just you're not seeing it.
Great. That makes a lot of sense. And our next hot take for Michelle Clare, who's so kind to join us tonight. You can find more about her at michelleclaire.net. Michelle, speaking of the poltergeist earlier, that really interesting psychic lady from Poltergeist, she was actually based on a famous psychic lady. And so my last hot take for you, famous psychics, and we've all seen them, right? They have books, they have TV shows, etc. Are they more charisma or are they more genuine ability, or maybe a mix of both?
I think it's a mix of both. Here's the thing, and I'm very much aware of this. A good psychic needs to be able to produce information accurately, but also in the way that the sitter is able to receive it, right? So you have to have both. You have to have accurate information, and then you also have to be aware of your presentation, a good bedside manner, if we're going to call it that, right? Because different clients are willing to receive and open to receive things, or are ready to receive differently than others. And so I think it really needs both. So when you say genuine ability, that's huge and that's important. So I'm a certified medium. I went through blind studies to be tested. You can go to Find a Certified Medium website. There's probably about 30 or 40 of us on there now. But basically, we were tested through blind studies to prove that we can actually do what we can do. And that's really important. If you're going to have somebody that you want to connect with, you want somebody who's been vetted to some extent.
Oh, good. And I would actually like to circle back real quick here. Can NDEs been induced or simulated? CJ brought up who would be studying, the brains in these types of situations. But there actually was a time, and by the way, this really ties into the notion of soul and body and exactly where does the soul lie and that sort of thing. And I'm sure you have some takes on that. But during the French Revolution, actually, CJ, a lot of people got sent to the old guillotine, and sometimes they would ask them questions or be talking to them and record how long the head would continue to speak once the body had left the head or once the head had left the body, right? So there actually was some study in that. And of course, that really, like I said, that really brings up the notion of soul. Like, what exactly is it that keeps our soul attached to our body? Is there a soul in there? When does it decide to go, and that sort of thing? Do you have any thoughts on that, Michelle?
I do. So the majority of our soul is still at home in that heavenly realm. I want you to think that each of our souls is bigger than the United States. So the part of my soul that is in human form, Michelle, is probably like my little tiny pinky fingernail. It's like your soul is dipping its finger in the water in the human realm in this version of your body, but the majority of our soul is still at home in that heavenly realm. And so when we decide to completely leave our body, we're pulling our finger out of the water and completely going home.
Oh, great. And that makes me feel better if I'm ever sentenced to the guillotine, I think. So, all right. Well, we couldn't be more happy to have Michelle Clare here with us tonight. I'm going to put her website back up on the screen, michellclaire.net. Please, everyone, check that out. And Michelle, if you have time, we have a few listener questions for you that I'll pull up and CJ and Smitty can present to you if you're up for that.
Okay.
First one we've got is from listener Mario Kid 342.
Smitty, I'll let you take it.
Do you use any healing crystals, and do you get certain color, I'm assuming crystals, to help with different situations, or any herbs you would like that keep you feeling energized?
So I don't, I like crystals, but I only like them because I'm like, this is beautiful. I want to carry this one, or I want to wear it. It's not one of the tools that I use in my daily practice. What will happen though is the spirit team for the loved one might come through and say, hey, tell them they need to wear something blue around their neck to help with their voice and their throat chakra. So I'll follow that advice from spirit, but I like them for their beauty. And yes, I can feel different energy on different crystals. I think they all have their own story, but it's not a tool that I use. And the same with the herbs. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Real quickly, the movie that we were talking about is named Flatliners. That was driving me crazy.
Flatliners, that's right.
It was.
Flatliners. All right.
Next question.
Here's one coming at you from, actually, we've addressed that. This is from Texas here.
Emily from Texas. Do near-death experiences impact a person's outlook on life and death? Do they often experience a significant shift in their beliefs or attitudes?
Yes, it's huge. So most people who've had a near-death experience come back, actually everyone I've ever talked to, knowing that we are here for a bigger mission or a bigger reason, that there's so much more to life than our little humanness had been tapping into at that point in time. We know that about 80% of people who experience near-death experiences tend to have marriages that end in divorce because you cannot come back the same person. You can't go over there, know what you know, feel what you feel, and then come back and live life the way you had before. So it significantly shifts your beliefs and your attitude. And I have never met one person who's had a near-death experience, literally never one, that is afraid to die, because we all know where we're going and we all know that we're all going to be okay.
Michael from Florida asks, I'm fascinated by the connection between near-death experience and past lives. Have you come across any cases where individuals recall past life memories during their NDE? Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, not that I'm aware of. I do believe that there might be people here and there that say, oh, I remember that lifetime, or they're shown things that it was like, hey, this was a gift you had in that lifetime or a strength, please use it again. But when we talk about past lives, there's one thing I want to bring up about that. So in this heavenly realm, or in most of the universe, there is no such thing as time. So those past lives, future lives, they're all actually right here in the present moment, happening in this moment. So what they would be, if this happened, what they would be being shown is a version of them that's existing right now in another place.
Well, I've
Great.
got a
I would like
question.
to.
Sorry.
What's that, Smitty?
I was just going to say, out of all the people we've talked to that have had near-death experiences, what is the longest one that someone has sustained? I mean, minute-wise.
You know what? I honestly don't know the answer to that. Yeah. But I mean, I know because here's the thing. Some of the people that I know that have had them, I know what time they call, their death. I actually even have a friend who was then shoved into the hospital room and left in the darkness because they thought he was gone. And it didn't happen until the next morning when he fell out of the bed that they realized he was still alive. So I don't know what the time frame on was from when his heart stopped to when he started beating again. But it's a great, I know there are books out there. There are like 90 Minutes in Heaven. There are different book titles like that. I don't know the people who've written these books, but I think that's a great question. I don't have an exact answer for it.
Okay, thank you.
It was a good question, Smitty. And I just want to follow up with Michelle on the past life situation. I have heard of folks, it does seem clear that maybe some people come back with enhanced psychic abilities after near-death experience. Have you encountered anyone that's come back with any other abilities, like perhaps a new language that they're speaking all of a sudden?
Yeah, so I've heard about these stories, and I know people that know these people, but I haven't actually gotten to meet them one-on-one yet, but hopefully I will in the near future. Yes, I have heard about that. And my understanding on that from spirit world is really what they're doing is they are either tapping into them in another timeline where they speak another language, or they're bringing in more of their whole soul. So let's say they just had their pinky finger of their soul in before, and now maybe they have two fingers. So they're bringing in more of their whole soul into that moment.
So what's your take on reincarnation then, Michelle?
Yeah. So, I mean, I do believe that we do reincarnate. And I love to use this picture behind me as my example of that. So with this picture, I think you can see the streaks or the rays of light. This would be equivalent to my spirit, and each lifetime that I come in would be a different ray of light. So that would be my soul of Michelle as one of these rays of light. And then the next time my soul decides to come in again, it will be another ray of light. So what can be happening, I can be in multiple lifetimes at one time, right? Because think of the sun, how many rays of light are coming off it in one moment. So it's not linear the way that we're thinking of it. But the other thing that's important about that is I'll have loved ones who will say to me, if my loved one, how do I know if they're going to reincarnate now and come back before me? That version of your loved one will always exist as that ray of light. If their soul chooses to come back in again, it will create a new ray of light.
Oh, very interesting. I mean, really interesting. Is there any advice you have for people to enhance their ability to contact or be aware of their other lives?
Well, there are multiple people who do past life regressions, and that's always a great place to start. But I would say, find somebody that has good ratings. I don't know if you want to find them on Yelp or some word of mouth or something like that. But it's really great to have a guided past life regression if that's something that you want to tap into. And then after you kind of get the footwork or the grounding on that, then you can probably start tapping into it more on your own.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michelle. And we have another listener question here.
Karen from Georgia. How do you respond to skeptics who claim that near-death experiences are just hallucinations or the brain's response to trauma?
Yeah. You know what, Karen? I don't. It's not my issue. It's their issue. You know,
Like that.
it's okay. Like, I am fine. People are allowed to believe and think and feel whatever they want. We live on planet Earth. We see that happen every day long, every day, all day long, right? But I am not here to argue with someone or try to convince them that what I know is real is real. And that's part of our free will on planet Earth. So I mean, it's not something that I worry about at all.
I really like that. I'm gonna have to remember that comeback because we get a lot of that in UFO, Bigfoot, alien community. So I think that it can apply to a lot of things. Honestly, it really should apply to lots of things. But why should I care what everybody else thinks, right?
Well, to be fair, we
Yeah.
set up the name of our show, All Things Unexplained, to tell
Oh, that's
people we're
true.
not going to explain anything. We're just going to offer up some information and you make of it what you will.
Yeah.
Exactly. Just like
It would be like arguing with an atheist that there's God. It doesn't
Right.
matter, right? Because their soul plan to come here and believe that there's no God, source, divine energy was blessed and allowed to happen just like mine was. And so, you know, there's so much. This is our humanness, wanting to be right, wanting to have contrast, wanting to prove it. And you know what, you are going to find what you're looking for in this lifetime. So if you want to believe that it's not real, you'll find reasons to support that. And if you want to believe that it's real, you will find reasons to support that.
Yeah, I always get flabbergasted when I see people on Twitter and different places, and they'll get mad at certain shows or podcasts for having a certain guest on, right? And I'm thinking, you were literally just in an egg space talking about an alien human hybrid breeding program. How could you be mad because they had this person on their show talking about this? I don't understand. Like, how can you be so open-minded in that realm, but yet you're telling everybody else what to think about this space? So it just is flabbergasting to me. We have one more listener question for you, Michelle.
Okay.
Stephen from Arizona says, what advice would you give to someone who has a near-death experience and is struggling to make sense of it to integrate it into their life?
Yeah. Well, Stephen, if this is you, you've got to come out to Phoenix, Wild Horse Pass, the end of August, the IANS conference. So it's,
Which is a gorgeous hotel, by the way.
yeah, the IANS, capital IANDS. Okay. I'll be presenting at this conference. There are many more experiencers and presentations that'll be there, or tell your friend about it. You can also find them online. I think they have a YouTube channel, on and on. But really what we're going to find is that it might be hard right now to make sense of it, but you've got to look at it from a place of love and compassion, because this is really the story of the near-death experience. Love, compassion, that we are whole, that we are complete, that our soul is always whole, right? And so start looking into maybe this group, start looking into other near NDEers experiences. And then I want you to take the parts that resonate for you. And I want you to say, this makes sense to me. That feels right. You're allowed to fine tune it. So I had 3 NDEs. Each one was very different, right? Each one was different because it was what I needed at that time. So your NDE might have some things that are similar to other people's, but it's going to have many things that were specific just for you and for what you learned and needed in that moment.
Thank you.
Amazing. Mm-hmm. This has truly been one of the greatest conversations we've had on this podcast. So thank you so much for blessing us with your time and everything that we've learned on this podcast. It's interesting, over the course of the past 4 years, it's sort of all been wrapped up in this conversation in terms of downloading information and vibrations and frequencies and portals and what lies beyond. And I'm just, for one last moment here with our listeners, if you could share a thought with people in terms of how we can better clear our minds, clear our souls, so that we can operate on those vibrations and frequencies and have an opportunity to see the light that is there and to see those portals that are there and those opportunities. What can we do? What's one thing we all could do?
You have to start becoming aware of your belief system, because what limits us in our human form is our belief system. Whether we think it's right, wrong, good, bad, this is the only way. as soon as we start loosening the grip on what we believe has to be true because we've identified it with it because somebody told us that when we were 5 and we decided it was truth or whatever it was, as we loosen this grip on our belief system, more and more will be revealed to you. And also ask for more. Ask your guides, ask your angels, ask your loved ones, send me signs, send me information, connect with me. I want to know more.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And once again, you can learn more about Michelle. Head to michelleclare.net. We've got her name up there. That's MICHELLECLARE.net. And go connect with her so that you can have a deeper experience on your time, during your time Earthside here. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please do like, share, subscribe. I'm going to throw it to Tim for final thoughts.
Thank you for joining us tonight on All Things Unexplained. We've delved into the fascinating world of near-death experiences with our guest, Michelle Clare, shedding light on the profound and mysterious aspects of these extraordinary encounters. Remember, whether you're a skeptic or a believer, the stories we share remind us of the depth and complexity of the human experience. So let's all get off our phones. I think that's one thing we can do. Let's pray more. Let's get outside. We might not hear a Bigfoot or spot a UFO, but you might just find yourself out there. Smitty?
We're grateful for Michelle being here tonight. And remember, be happy, be strange, listen to All Things Unexplained. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Michelle.
All Things Unexplained.
What's your hot take on Travis Taylor?
I've got an exclusive for you guys if you want it about the Alaska.
We do.
Okay.
Dr. Taylor was revealed to be the chief scientist of the UAP task force with the Pentagon.
So some of that, I think, sir, we'll save for closed session.
All Things Unexplained is free to watch on YouTube and listen to wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to support our show, you can visit our YouTube store. Additionally, you can find us on Venmo under All Things Unexplained. Be sure to check out our website, allthingsunexplained.com. All proceeds from the sales of Dr. Mounce's books on Amazon and Audible also go straight to our show.